Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. It's an honor here to have Ron Cushing. He is the founder of Immigration Concepts and he is an expert in all things SEVIS and student employment. And he's a wealth of knowledge, so I'm really honored to have him here. He's also the director of international services at the University of Cincinnati in Ohio. And I just found out when I was doing a little bit of research that this year they have a 10% international student population, which is the highest in history. So big congrats to Ron there, because that's quite the achievement and it speaks a lot of the diversity of the University of Cincinnati. So welcome, Ron.
Great, glad to be here.
Great. Yeah, as some of you on my YouTube channel know, I'm a former consular officer. I adjudicated thousands of student visas, and we're here to talk about OPT, CPT, and maybe on-campus employment if we get some time. So the question for Ron is, what are the big things that students need to know about optional practical training, OPT?
Well, the biggest thing is you need to understand how much of it you are entitled to. If you hold F-1 status, you're entitled to get 12 months of optional practical training for each higher degree that you receive. So if you get a bachelor's degree, do OPT, go back, get a master's degree, you can get 12 more months of OPT, go back and get a doctorate degree, you can get 12 more months of OPT, but the degrees always have to be at a higher level. They can't be at the same level or a lower level of study. Some of the big concerns and questions that we get from our students is understanding the window in which you have to apply for OPT, because some students wait until it's too late to apply. Essentially, you have a 5-month window to apply for your practical training when you are getting close to graduation, which is when most students decide to use your practical training. You're allowed to apply up to 90 days prior to your graduation and no later than 60 days following graduation. The mistake most students make is they wait until they get a job offer, then they apply, hoping it's going to come very quickly. Nothing comes very quickly from USCIS, which is where you have to apply for the card through to get your work permit, unless you pay a premium processing fee. And the good news is right now there is a premium processing fee for OPT. You have to pay $1,500 and it will guarantee approval within 30 days. But most students don't have or want to pay $1,500. And the way to avoid that is you make sure 90 days before your scheduled graduation, you're working with your DSO to apply for OPT. That way the card will come, it'll be ready when you're ready to graduate, and no premium processing fee will be necessary. The final thing is students need to understand under what circumstances OPT can be used. By far, the most common way it's used is following graduation. So you're getting ready to graduate, you apply for it, you get a full 12 months. But you can use it prior to graduation under certain circumstances. You can use it full-time or part-time during scheduled breaks like the summer. You can use it part-time while you are enrolled full-time, but in that case, it would have to be 20 hours a week or less. If you're a graduate student working on a thesis or dissertation, once all your required coursework is done, you can apply for post-completion practical training. So it's important to understand all the different times you can apply for it, when you should be applying for it, and how many times you can get it.
Okay, great. And what are the big questions you get about curricular practical training or CPT?
So curricular practical training is much more difficult for students to understand because unlike OPT, where there's direct regulations that stipulate when you can apply, how you apply, all of those kinds of things, CPT is really more related to what the institutional policies are surrounding those opportunities. So as the title would indicate, curricular practical training, it means that the employment opportunity you've been presented must somehow be an integral part of your program of study. And so not every school offers curricular practical training as an option. At some schools, some programs within the school might qualify for curricular practical training, but other programs not. In general, at most institutions, at least some of their programs will offer curricular practical training opportunities, but not all. And so that's why it's very important for you to be working very closely with the designated school officials at your school to understand what is possible and what is not. At my institution, for example, we have programs that require what's called cooperative education. And so they take 5 years to finish their degrees, and starting year 2, every other semester, they have to do a full-time employment opportunity. Those can be authorized. It increases the amount of time to get the degree, but those students are going to do 5 opportunities. Other programs will only offer 1 opportunity for CPT. And then again, some of our programs, our students do not have the ability to get CPT at all. And so every student knows of CPT. They start asking about it when they come in. But the issue is it's your school that really dictates what's going to be available to you. So you need to be in close contact with your DSO. Some of the big questions that we get from students are, how does CPT affect my optional practical training? And the answer is it doesn't until you reach 365 days of full-time curricular practical training. If you use that amount of CPT during your program of study, you lose your optional practical training after you graduate. And so it's important to understand what your curricular options are and what might be some options to avoid 365 days. So for example, our students who have to do 5 co-ops, they know they're going to exceed 365 days. So their questions to us are, how do I avoid using 365 days of CPT so I can keep OPT after I graduate? And the answer is you have to do your co-ops back in your home country or a country outside the United States for 2 of those semesters. And so every school will have nuances like that you'll have to work through with your DSO. But as long as you stay under 365 days of full-time CPT, you get the OPT after you graduate. And the big thing is, regardless of how much CPT you're ultimately going to use, CPT is a work authorization, and it requires authorization on your I-20 form. And if you fail to get a timely authorization on your I-20 form, you have violated your F-1 status, and you have to avoid that at all costs. So make sure you understand with your DSO what the requirements are for getting that authorization, and that you never engage in a CPT opportunity until the DSO has actually authorized it.
Is that authorization something they get after they go to campus?
It is. So, they have to complete 1 year of study prior to being eligible for CPT. There is an exception for graduate programs that require CPT during the first year of study. But every school will have policies and procedures that you have to go through for your CPT. And so if you're in a program or going to a school that has CPT opportunities, make sure, again, you're talking with your DSOs about what the process is. And once you're eligible, making sure that you submit the request to the international office and get the approval on your I-20 before you start working.
It seems like a lot to navigate. Do you have any advice for international students as they're going through and trying to pick programs in the United States, and something like CPT is very important to them?
Well, certainly if CPT is something that you're interested in and want to engage in during your program, it's very easy to find out from a website what schools offer things like cooperative education opportunities. Or if you're a graduate student, you can look at what the course requirements are for a program at that level. You'll have to dig down to the program level, not just generally the admission website, but go to the program itself and ask, do you have either required or optional curricular practical training opportunities for students in your program? And you can actively find out which schools offer those opportunities prior to applying.
And how hands-on is a school in helping the student find either CPT or OPT?
A lot depends on the school itself. So, some schools are very hands-on. They'll have a career services office or some other type of co-op offices if they have required co-ops that will help students find jobs, especially when they offer it for curricular practical training. Optional practical training, not as much. But again, it depends on the institution. Some will have extensive resources that will help you do everything from, look for employers who will hire international students to how you interview with U.S. employers, how you write resumes. And some schools will do very little to none. So it really depends, upon the institution itself.
And we hear of day one CPT schools. Can you talk about the concept of day one CPT and your thoughts on it?
So day one CPT is a concept where a school implements a program, and it's only at the graduate level. It's not available at the undergraduate level, but the school would offer a hybrid course of study that requires a certain number of in-person appearances each semester, and then the remainder of the class for each semester is taught online. And they offer curricular practical training from day one of the program, meaning if you find an employment opportunity, they'll have a class you register for, and you can be authorized for it simultaneously with studying at the same time. So a couple of times during each semester, you'd be on campus for in-person appearances to meet the in-person requirement for holding an F-1 visa. And then the remainder of the term, you would be taking your classes online while engaged in CPT. Now, this is not a widespread practice in the United States, but there are about a couple of dozen schools that specialize in day one CPT. So if that's what you're really interested in, you should Google day one CPT universities, and you'll get a list of those that offer that. In general, most large state schools, highly ranked schools, are not going to offer day one CPT simply because the work becomes more the priority than the academic study. And some schools just aren't going to offer that. But there are some schools that offer that if that is what you are interested in.
Right. And the 365 days, how are those calculated exactly, given breaks and whatnot?
So in general, they're counted by a term, a semester. So CPT is going to be authorized usually from the first day of a semester through the last day of a semester. And there's some ability to have some flexibility there, but the authorization will have a clear start date and a clear end date, and every one of those days is counted. And so you can't throw out weekends or holidays. Whatever's authorized on your I-20 for the CPT that particular term, just count the days, and that's how many days you have used.
And for both CPT and OPT, the student does get paid. What do those payments or salaries look like?
Well, that depends on the job that you get, with the company. And especially for CPT, there are certainly non-paid options that can be engaged in as well. But what the payment is, really depends upon the employer that you find.
Great. And outside of CPT and OPT, if a student wanted to supplement supplement the way they pay for their education, what other options does an F-1 student legally have in the United States?
So the big option is on-campus employment opportunities. So every international student is allowed to work 20 hours per week on campus for the institution that they're studying at, while school's in session. During scheduled breaks, they're allowed to work more than 20 hours a week. So for example, the summer, the summer enrollment for most schools and programs is optional. And during that time period, you can work more than 20 hours a week. Right now, we're in a break between our fall semester and beginning of spring semester. And during that break, if you don't go home and there's an opportunity at your school, you can work more than 20 hours a week. So on-campus employment is the main opportunity. There are also a couple of opportunities for off-campus employment if specific requirements are met. One is called severe economic hardship. You have to be enrolled for at least a full academic year, and you have to prove that there has been a severe and unforeseen change to your financial situation. You document that first to your DSO, and then they help you apply to USCIS for a part-time work permit. On occasion, there are countries that are in turmoil, and Homeland Security can enact what's called special student relief. And right now, there's about 13 countries that have that in place. And so when, bad things are happening in certain countries like wars or severe economic depression, Homeland Security can enact special student relief. And that is a very special program because it allows you to apply for both a full-time work permit and the ability to study part-time. And so whenever you're from one of those countries that's affected, your institution should be notifying you that that's an option, and you can work with your DSO to get authorized for it. A final type of employment that's available is employment with an international organization. And so in the US, there's a group of employers that have an international organization identifier attached to it, the World Bank, those kinds of things. In my area of the country, the Midwest, there aren't many of those, but certainly in Washington, D.C., Washington State, there's lots of more opportunities for that, and students can apply for part-time work authorization to work for an international organization while school's in session or full-time during scheduled breaks. And so those are all of the additional employment options that are available to students.
Fantastic. And do you feel like students who generally want to work on campus have that opportunity, that those jobs are not too competitive?
It really depends on the institution. Some institutions have lots of opportunities. Others have very little to none. Certainly your larger state schools are going to have ample opportunities. At my institution, for example, during any given term, probably half of our international students, and we have about 6,000 of them, have on-campus job opportunities. It really depends on the institution, but certainly you're going to have more opportunities at larger state schools than you will at smaller private liberal arts schools.
Great. And a lot of F-1 students work with agents, especially students from India. But some students that are in Africa may not be working in agents, or other countries. They might not have agents. And so you reference talking to your DSO. Do you feel like students who have not been admitted into that university can reach out to the international advising office for that university? Or do you advise them to talk to the agents that they're working through? How do you advise both students that have not been admitted in, and then obviously once they're admitted, do you have a different recommendation for how they can ask these questions?
You ask different DSOs, you'll get a different answer on those things. My institution certainly uses agents. We work very hard with them to make sure that they understand things like CPT and who's eligible and which of our majors are STEM fields and all those kinds of things. But at the end of the day, we don't want our students asking legal questions of our agents. We want them asking them to the experts, us, the DSOs. And so whether you're admitted or not, there isn't an institution that you're going to be admitted to that doesn't have a DSO, or you wouldn't be able to go to that institution. You should always be asking legal questions, especially about CPT, OPT, on-campus work to that DSO. And every school, whether you're either just thinking about applying, you've applied and you're admitted but yet to arrive, or you're actually on the campus, the DSOs are going to answer your questions and be responsive to you.
Awesome. That's great. Do you have anything to add on this topic for now, or should we just kind of open it up? This is on YouTube, obviously, so people can write questions if they have them, and we can answer them later or make another video. But do you have anything to add for now, Ron?
Oh, I think that's everything for now.
Okay, and before we go, tell us a little bit more about the University of Cincinnati. Just for those people who are watching, they're curious, maybe they want to know how to apply to the University of Cincinnati. What makes it so special?
Well, I think one of the things that makes us special is we are the institution in the U.S. that started cooperative education back in 1906. And so at the undergraduate level, most of our students are going to be able to get CPT and get those work experiences during their program of study. And so that's one of the things that I think separates us from a lot of schools. Not only do we do co-op, but we invented it. And as a large state school, we obviously offer hundreds of different degrees at all levels of study: associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's and doctorate degrees. We're located in the state of Ohio in Cincinnati, and some of our programs are the absolute, top ranked in their fields. Our industrial design programs, our criminal justice programs. If you go to our website, you'll certainly be able to find details about those highly ranked programs. But we have over 6,000 international students on campus any given term, and we feel like we have a lot to offer. And certainly, being in the Midwest, our expenses are fairly significantly cheaper than if you go to New York City or Los Angeles and those kinds of places. And so we think we have a lot to offer our international students.
Definitely good athletic program, and I'm a Midwest girl, so I support it, Ron. I'll always support the Midwest. Sorry, everyone else. So, all right, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for being here. Your expertise, I mean, undoubted, Thank you.
Thanks.